Hi, everybody. Lawrence Grand Prix, he, him, Director of Research for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. We're a grassroots think tank based in Baltimore City. So going off of the PAB conversation, I want to just ground this in one of the critical things that we've done in our 10 years of work is try to shift power to community. And understanding one of the biggest impediments to that is as kind of what was happening with the PABs, even if you get a victory at a state level, if you can't implement it at a local level, they're hoping that folks don't understand that power is about implementation at the local level when it comes to community control. So to go to cannabis, been researching this way since 2014. I've researched other states, and what I realized was exactly this problem, that every state, along with Sergio's point, every politician claimed to be doing some form of reparations, every state claimed to be doing some form of reparations. When you look at how the bills actually worked in practice, many of them centered power in the state executive, in local executives, in committees of experts in the state capitol, and things that were being funded were not actually representative of what I viewed as the definition of reparations, which in short, for me, is the people who were aggrieved or harmed have the ability to choose for themselves the mechanism of redress for that harm. So that meant that we had to design a political vision of reparations that, as much as possible, because there are no guarantees, created a framework for local controls that the people actually in the neighborhoods. Again, mass incarceration is somewhat of a myth. We don't have mass incarceration in this country. We have targeted hyper incarceration of particular demographics in particular neighborhoods. So particular zip codes, Black, Latino, poor, white, create a massive percentage of the drug arrests in this country. And that doesn't just impact the individuals in jail. It impacts the families. They have to move. It impacts housing vacancy rates. It impacts church attendance. It impacts nonprofit creation. It impacts the ability to have things like football games and youth groups. Like the community fabric itself was shredded by targeted hyper incarceration. So here's what we did in the bill that passed in 2022 to deal with that. So the Community Restoration and Repair Fund is 30% of all the tax revenues for cannabis legalization in the state. Remember, medical cannabis is not taxed. You don't tax medicine. Recreational cannabis, adult use cannabis is taxed in terms of the excise tax, the extra tax. So 30% of all tax revenue goes into this fund. There will be a calculation by the comptroller of Maryland to determine what percentage from each locality, county, or city of the total amount of cannabis arrests that county, locality, or city produced in terms of Baltimore City. And then that will be the mechanism of determining what percentage of that cannabis restoration fund that locality gets. And that was very intentionally calculated to ensure the places that were most impacted by cannabis incarceration got the most money. And as many of you will know, it's very difficult to say, just give money to Black people. Just give money to brown people, because the conservative courts have weaponized the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause to claim that that's non-constitutional discrimination. That's going to get even worse in June once the Supreme Court guts affirmative action. So this was intentionally designed from Jump Street to deal with that dynamic. Now, the second part is the part that you all need to know about. So in addition to being proportionate to cannabis arrests, the idea is that the money will be given to localities, and there has to be an ordinance by the county council or city council in the case of Baltimore to determine the mechanism of how the funds will be distributed with guide rails, with some limitations. So one limitation is they cannot fund police. The other limitation is they can't play the shell game, i.e. they can't use the funds from cannabis legalization to replace already allocated funds already in the budget. That's what happened with the lottery taxation revenue that was supposed to go to education. They just cut the education budget by a commensurate amount every year. So it never actually went to education, or did I didn't get to stop that shell game. But the important thing is, again, you have to, when this fund is created, the money is going to start flowing basically a year after cannabis is actually being sold. So I project we probably won't be selling cannabis till late 2024, early 2025. So you need to have an ordinance in your county council or city council as soon as possible, so that before that money comes, and frankly, before the people who are going to challenge your vision of reparations understand what's going on, you have to go to your city council or county council people and demand a vision of reparations that reflects your community's needs. I don't know what Prince George's County needs. I don't know what Calvert County needs. That's why we designed the bill to take that into account and put the power in your hands to push your local representatives to build a vision of reparations that does what you all think needs to be done. Now in Baltimore, we're already in the process of writing our ordinance with some city council people, and we're hoping that can serve as a potential model for some of what other reparations councils might look like. But the idea is that you all need to think about participatory governance. You need to think about who you want to hold some money, because there are things called local management boards, LMBs, which are the stock holding reservoir for lots of state money and federal money when it comes to localities. In Baltimore City, we at LBS have pushed for the past decade to push back against our local management board being the sole entity that's seen as being possible vested in holding state revenue, because they fund the people who are already well funded. They fund the people who are already politically powerful. That's not reparations. So if you want to have a vision of reparations, the idea is to create the possibility of local innovation and local control so that you can push your trusted county council people or county executive, if you trust them, to build a vision of reparations that actually reflects what you want to do. But you have to pass an ordinance at the local level to determine how the money is going to be spent. So just like with PABs, that local enforcement is going to be critical, because though it's not the police, there are very much entities all over the state that are going to see this as a cash cow. And they're going to be claiming to do work that they claim is reparative, but it's up to you to push back on that and to vet that and determine whether those institutions, be it the local management board, be it local powerful nonprofits, local powerful fiscal agents or fiscal sponsors, all these people are going to be pushing for this money at the local level when they figure out the actual mechanism of how this money is flowing. So right now, when we have actual time and frankly a head start before people know what's happening, this is your political window to really push the most radical vision of local control of reparations you can locally where you are.